Due to the update Aquatic added in Minecraft, underwater houses have become extremely popular, and you can understand why. The atmosphere down here is absolutely incredible, but there's one part of the ocean that is a little bit of a struggle to come up with ideas for, and that's the coral biome. So what I want to show you today are a bunch of underwater house designs that will hopefully get you thinking outside of the box when building underwater. And as you can see, we're in a coral reef biome which involves many different colours and very, very bright ones at that. So if you can't beat them, join them. It can be very, very difficult to build with all of these colours, but if we build in the exact same colours or close to, we can make a house that matches rather well. And the first one that I want to show you is this one. It's a very modern looking house and it blends seamlessly into its surroundings. So there's a few things to mention, and despite this looking rather complex, it's surprisingly easy to build. The first thing that I do want to mention is that it is attached to a bit of terrain at the back. You could make this freestanding, however I think it's much easier to build if you've got something to back it up onto. So the premise behind this one is that you take a few colours, in this case we've got magenta and purple terracotta, and you place the trim block as one line making a shape, and then you connect it up with whatever. Now I've made a very, very rough shape. You take the second one and you create an overhang, so it's only one block over the edge so that you've got a bit of shape, but with that one block difference. From there you connect up the glass and you've got yourself a very basic framework to a house. The other thing to mention is that it's not all on the same Y coordinate, so it goes slightly up at this end, and there's even another section. So imagine that you've just made this, just pop another one a few blocks higher, and you've got yourself a really nice feature. Now the other thing is that it's decorated with a bunch of coral gardens, which is pretty unique. It even has a few fences that make it look like it's held up. Even though it's underwater, it doesn't need to be floating. That's why it's kind of connected to some terrain at the back, and it's got these little stilts on as well. The roof is fairly flat, made out of full blocks, but there's a trim one, and then there's the darker colour on the inside. So as you can see, this is a really nice house. It works really well, so it's quite a simple but effective building technique to use. Now if we go on the inside, you'll be surprised at how much space there actually is in here. You could utilise this quite well, and the main thing is because there is so much glass, especially in a coral reef biome, you get such a great view, and I think that's the main reason to build underwater, at least for myself, is the views underneath. And if you do build onto the back of a bit of terrain, there's plenty of space for you to build whatever you need underground itself. So if I dug up here, there's, yep, bit of sand there already. So that gives you, oh dear, I've ruined this house already. That is a bad thing about building underwater, is that you can easily break through, cause a bit of a landslide and a bit of a mess as well. However, this is a very simple way to build a modern house, and this would indeed work above water as well. However, I think you can agree, in this setting with all of these bright colours, it really does fit quite nicely. Now, the next build that I want to show you is more of a conceptual one. And you might recognise this, or maybe not. This is a very old-fashioned sea diving helmet. And it used to be made out of metal, essentially, really heavy metal. And that would help weigh the person down. But this is basically just a giant version of that. So it's kind of an organic when it comes to the build itself. And you'll notice that it's actually got a cracked glass on the front. This is where the person would view out. And it's got a pretty unique entrance. But let's talk about the outside for a minute first. So this build was made out of stripped acacia and stripped birch wood. Now that's pretty important because it gives this really nice faded appearance. Now I do know that the textures aren't quite finished, but I doubt they're going to change too much from what we're seeing here. Underwater it makes it seem like it's really waterlogged and faded, and I just absolutely love the appearance of this. So as for the shape, it is simple, but not simple to build. It builds itself up and then essentially has a dome on the top with a few rings around with a larger ring on the front, and that's basically it. It doesn't have too many details except for this little bit at the back, which is meant to be kind of like the pipe or a hook. Then there's a little nozzle on the front and then a bit of iron bars. But other than that, the main thing is to try and get that giant sphere just right, and that can be incredibly difficult to do. Building circles in Minecraft, especially very small ones, is tough. If we built this any smaller, it wouldn't look the same at all. But it is pretty sizable. And you'll see that this entrance is actually made out of reeds. So all this is doing is blocking the water from coming in, and it has the added effect of making it seem like it's got a grill on the front, because these used to have like a little iron bar type thing, which is really cool. So this is kind of accurate, even if it is a bit weird on the inside. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of space to work with in here. And of course, there's enough space to go underground as well if you wish. Most of these, because they are on the sea floor, will give you that option. But because the acacia and birch is fairly easy to get your hands on, this is made out of almost entirely wood. So if you can build underwater and put up with the drowning part, or even if you can get your hands on a conduit, this is a really rad idea for an underwater house. This one was placed in the coral biome, but I'm pretty sure that this would work really deep down. It just looks really nice surrounded by the bright colours, as it does make it look even more faded than it already does. So let's move on to the next one, shall we? Now you might have expected this, because this isn't going to be the only shell house. Now this one is a spiral design, and this one is slightly harder to make, I'm afraid, because it's a bit of a unique shape. Building at an angle is already tough, but building at an angle then giving it ridges is even tougher. So it's basically trying to mimic a shell from real life, and then it's got all the space that you need inside. On top of that, we've got some highlights for some windows, and it doesn't have to be an entirely white build. You could mimic loads of colors. The best thing to do on this case would be to go online, have a look at some shells. It may not even be this one in particular. I'm not very well versed on the names of shells, but you could just find any, and I'm pretty sure it would look really at home underwater. So let's go and take a look inside this pretty unique house. This is one of the few designs that works really well with multiple layers. Of course, the further up the house you go, the less space you get, all the way up to the top where there's a tiny bedroom and a little bit of space in here. You can add little touches such as coral on the top. Of course, lighting it up with sea pickles helps an awful lot. And then adding chimneys and all that kind of stuff. You can really get creative. If you wanted to, you could even build a mollusk inside, you know, poking its head out and saying hello, because they do sort of scuttle along the floor. Or if you wanted to make it even more realistic, as if you didn't need to, you could create a little trail from the mollusk all the way like over here, just creating a ridge. That would make it seem even more like it's at home. Any kind of shell design should work underwater, and this isn't even the last one that I'm going to show you today. So let's bear that in mind and move on to the next one. Now the next one I want to show you is kind of one you might have expected as well. This is an Atlantis style build, or a ruins. Now this is the only build that I'm going to show you today that doesn't have an interior, because it has a nice feature of a conduit inside of the top of this dome. And that, of course, will give you unlimited breathing and swimming, etc. It is a really useful thing. So there is no air pocket in this build at all. So all of the chests and the furnaces and the crafting table, they're just all out here. The only thing you really need air for is when you're starting to farm. In which case, why not go straight underground for that, as there's plenty of space down there, and you don't really want to ruin the effect going on here. I did try and make this with some air in it. However, it looked much more at home, especially in an Atlantis style theme, just completely waterlogged. And this house on its own wouldn't look quite right if it wasn't for all of the ruins next to it. This is what really makes it feel at home, are these abandoned and very old looking pillars. I want to briefly talk about making ruins because it's not quite as easy as it seems. There's a bit of an art to it. You can just make a bunch of pillars, then break it down a little bit, but it doesn't quite work. So you see that this bottom half is relatively intact, but at the top, what we've got is exactly the same thing, but some of it is broken off. Now that's fine, but the next one along is even more ruined, and that one is the most ruined. So this one doesn't match at all. I've knocked off some of the blocks and put in some slabs, and this one has even more. Some of it should be like a staircase there, but it's just a slab underneath, and it gets progressively lower as it does. And this helps feed your eyes into the main thing, which is the house itself. Now over here we've got another one, but this one is connected up slightly, and then we got a ruined at the end. So if you're going to do something like this, and this one is full, but this one is broken, make sure you put some debris on the floor as well, so it actually looks like it's fallen apart and sunken down. And don't forget to texture the floor around it as well. All of that together really binds it in and works as one complete build. Alright, let's move on to the next one, shall we? This is the next one that I want to show you, and it rather cleverly uses the conduit as a pearl. That's right, this is another shell, but it belongs to an oyster this time. And this is another one that fits absolutely perfectly within the barrier reef biome. So this is not easy to make. This went over several iterations before it reached here. The key is to start at the back and gradually work your way forward, but also make sure you have a really nice ovular shape. Organics like this can be really tough, but all I would say is persevere with it and you'll get it in the end. And don't be afraid to completely knock it down and start again. But anyway, all this does is serves as an entrance to our base, because the base itself is actually all underground. This is, yeah, entirely an underground base. So what I've done here is I've got a trapdoor which is waterlogged with water, and then I've got another quartz slab here which is also waterlogged, and when you open it, the water will flow down and not spread everywhere, ruining all of your carpets like I did earlier. So the inside of this does look the same as like the oyster up there. It's all made out of quartz, but all it does is lead downstairs into a proper cave system. Since I thought that, you know, this is underground, I might as well keep it within that underground theming, and I think this works really well. The transition from nature to nature works really, really well in this case. Now, I've gone over making this sort of thing in the past. The key is to knock out a shape and then build lots of arches over each wall and the opposite, so it kind of circles round, and you create a really three-dimensional space. And then you just fill in all of these right angles that would look rather out of place with some slabs, and that creates this really smooth appearance. You add some of these cobblestone walls as stalactites, or is it stalagmites? I always forget. And you get this really nice appearance, and you mix in some stone brick along with cobblestone slabs. Of course, in the new 1.14 update, we will get stone slabs, so you could imagine that this would have no texture whatsoever, because we could do the whole thing with the stone texture. Now, that would be really, really cool, but it would be a very different result as well. And then you decorate it with the normal stuff: bed, bookshelf, your chests, everything you might need. I've kept it fairly minimalist because I want to keep the overall effect of this cave. And the dripping also makes it really feel like this is an underwater cave. So this is pretty much a cave house, but the entrance is fairly underwater themed. If only I could leave the house. It doesn't want me to leave. So this was a pretty unique one, but I've got a few more to show you. This one is also more organic than it is structural, but it is rather ironic because what we've got here is the reverse fishbowl. This is kind of like Sandy's house from SpongeBob SquarePants, where we've got a fishbowl, but instead of water on the inside, there's air on the inside. And it's all about the shape. Now, this is kind of reminiscent of my underwater bottle, you know, the Shipwreck in the bottle. And this has a really nice wide fishbowl shape. Now, the best thing that I can suggest to do if you're going to be making one of these is to Google up some pictures of fishbowls and try and recreate it as much as possible. So on the top, we have a little stopper made out of wood, and then some decorations to make it seem like it's been here a long time and overgrown. And the entrance is very simple. It's just a normal, very slow entrance as you fall down the water onto a ladder. Now, the only thing that I will say is that the interior, because it has all of these organics in, like the fish and some grass, custom-made stuff, there's not a lot of space in here for your house. But if you made it big enough, you would probably find that you could make a whole bunch of stuff in here. And it's mainly a gimmicky kind of house, but just like I did with the Shipwreck in a bottle, it does serve as a pretty nice and unique starter house, even if it is a little bit of a pain. Now remember, draining the water out of here is not an easy task, so if you're going to be doing this, make sure you've got some sponges on you. The next house that I want to show you is the turtle house. Now, because turtles are in Minecraft, it seems pretty fitting that we actually have a turtle shell house itself. Now this is another organic build, and again, these big curved designs can be a little bit tricky, but if you give it enough practice, you'll be able to make one like that, one like this, and even the diving helmet. It just takes a little bit of time to get used to it. With this one, it's got a really nice green concrete trim, and it's got all the terracotta blocks mixed in there as well, giving it that spotty appearance. And the main thing here is we've got a nice chimney. Everything else is just incorporated underneath. Now this stripped birch log is almost identical to the underside of the turtle, so that works quite well. And then, as you might expect, it looks like this on the inside. It does look exactly like the inside of a turtle shell. There's actually a surprising amount of space in here. The only thing I might change here is the fireplace by adding a couple of fence gates, and then you could create like a bubble elevator that goes either in or out, or if you're really good at redstone, you could create one that does both. The other thing that you might want to consider if you make this turtle house is take it even further and make sure you hatch loads of turtles on beaches nearby so that this place could be absolutely swimming with turtles. You could even hatch a bunch inside and then let them roam free, and they will always return here, so this could become a hub of turtles. And the final one is yet another organic build. Now you may be wondering, these are a lot of organic houses, but the thing is, making houses underwater is not that different to making houses above water, because it's just a structure with a bit of air in between. But these are meant to be inspirational ideas for keeping it in theme underwater. And the last one that I have to show you here is this fallen vase. Now, back in that whole Atlantis kind of vibe, lots of things get lost into the ocean, whether it's shipwrecks or entire cities, according to Atlantis. But pottery is another thing that is kind of associated with being dropped into water. So what we've got is a massive one. Now, I must admit, from the side, it can be mistaken for a fish, but as soon as I've told you it's a pot, you can kind of see that yourself. So it's got this nice pattern in between, and again, we have this very complicated spherical ovular shape, but you will get used to that if you give it enough practice. As I said earlier, having builds underwater is all about the view, because this is unique in the new 1.13 update, and you really wouldn't want to lose that. So inside you can see, again, it's fairly spacious. And that's all I really have to show you for today's video. There's not a lot to say about this interior other than it's exactly what you would expect it to be, full of air in a vase shape. The only difference here is that there is an oak fence gate door, which you can open and close like that. Nothing too crazy, but this organic shape is really nice, and if you are rich, you could drop a few coins there as well. It's all to do with theming, and hopefully all of these have given you some inspiration to build your own, or maybe you've come up with a completely unique idea that works, especially in a coral reef biome. So I want to say a big thank you to my crew. You can see the fishbowl and the turtle in the background. There's the oyster. And Simozzy, Tenku, and Pearlescentmoon, along with LuviDubai, all helped put this video together. And I want to say thank you very much to you for watching. And I hope that this has given you some inspiration, and let me know what kind of house inspiration you might want to see next. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye!